For the East Coast. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Mike Haida. Keisha is off, and the clock is ticking before this incredibly powerful storm hits land. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan joining us live tonight from Savannah, Georgia. And in just a few hours, he is going to head into the eye of the storm with the hurricane hunters. First, though, he joins us live with the latest on the track. Good evening, Ryan.
Yeah, Mike, we just got the brand new 11 o'clock advisory in from the National Hurricane Center, and no real change with this advisory. We're going to start things off with the satellite loop, and you can see a very impressive hurricane churning in the Atlantic Ocean. Still a Category 4 hurricane. Winds are 140 miles per hour, and it's moving pretty good now to the west-northwest at 17 miles per hour. So let's take a look at the track. Where does it go from here? For the next 48 hours or so, we're very confident that it's taking a west-northwest to northwesterly trajectory across the Atlantic toward the coast of North Carolina. But what happens when it gets to the coast is when we have all sorts of question marks that are still here with this storm. What exactly does it do? It looks like the storm is going to stall as a very powerful major hurricane. It may even do a little loop off the coast or right on the coast and then drift to the south down toward Myrtle Beach and Charleston. So there's a lot of questions as to how strong that storm will be when it makes landfall, or even if it makes landfall. It could just hang out 15, 20, 25 miles off the coast of North Carolina. We have hurricane warnings in effect now from about Charleston or so in South Carolina north into the Outer Banks. It looks like the worst of the storm is heading toward southeastern North Carolina around the city of Wilmington. Mike, obviously, with a Category 4 hurricane expected to make landfall, that would be the strongest hurricane in North Carolina since Hazel back in 1954. People up and down the Carolinas, and even as far south as North Georgia, aren't really taking this for granted. They're pretty worried about it, Mike.
And Ryan, if that storm does park like you said it does, that means a lot of rain, right?
Yeah, it sure does, and I think that's one of the biggest concerns with this storm. Besides the Category 4 hurricane, the wind and the surge, it's going to be 20 to maybe 30 inches of rain inland because the storm won't move, just like what we saw with Hurricane Harvey near Houston. So that's a whole other issue for people away from the coast.
And not long from now, you're getting on a plane with hurricane hunters. When they go up into the eye of the storm, you will be with them. What kind of data do they collect to help with forecasters?
Yeah, it's exactly right. We were invited by the Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunters on one of their flights. It leaves tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. from the Savannah Hilton Head International Airport. We're going to be on that flight. And, Mike, what they do is they fly into the eye of the storm. They make several passes into the eye. We'll probably get into the eye 4 or 5 times. And every step along the way, almost every maybe half kilometer or so, they're transmitting data back to the National Hurricane Center. Wind speed, humidity, temperature, all of that information is used by the meteorologists at the National Hurricane Center to make their predictions and to also figure out just how strong Florence is. And as Florence makes it toward the Carolinas, that data becomes all the more critical. So we're going to be there along with them tomorrow, and we're going to have more of that tomorrow night at 11 o'clock. But for now, we'll send it back to you.
Can't wait to see your reports, Ryan. Thank you. Meantime, the Carolinas, obviously the biggest concern tonight. Mandatory evacuations have been ordered from much of the coast in both North and South Carolina. People were seen today boarding up the windows and basically just ditching town. The highways were reversed so that all the lanes could go out of the Carolinas. Those who were choosing to hunker down and deal with the wrath of Florence gathered food and supplies today as they prepared for the worst.
If it was a 5, I'd probably leave. But it's finances, really. I'm a 100% disabled vet, and I really don't have the extra money. Spare us. Spare Myrtle Beach. Spare everybody who's in line with this.
Now, right in the crosshairs, Florence is Wilmington, North Carolina. Tonight, we are hearing from some Connecticut natives who are rushing away from that area, but they are very worried about their homes there. NBC Connecticut's Matt Austin continues our team coverage tonight. He has that part of the story. Matt.
Yeah, Mike, that community could be hit with winds topping 100 miles per hour and a couple of...
Josh, we're keeping such a close eye on that. One of the ways the National Hurricane Center gets its data and information on hurricanes is by flying right into the storm. Well, today, Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan and photographer Dave Mulligan did exactly that. They flew on board one of the Hurricane Hunter planes, taking off early this morning from an airport in Savannah.
So this is a track of their flight right through the eye of the hurricane. They spent about 10 hours crisscrossing the storm. Ryan just got off the plane to tell us about his experience.
Yeah, Kevin and Carrie Lee, it was absolutely incredible flying into Florence, seeing it as it began to pick up. As we were out in the Atlantic Ocean, the clouds got a little thicker. You could see some of the rain on the window of the plane, and then you got into the eyewall of the hurricane, and that's when the worst of the wind and the worst of the rain was there. And the hurricane hunters, they're Air Force reservists, and what they do is they take all sorts of measurements through their flight. They don't just go to look at the hurricane, but what they do is they drop all sorts of instruments out of the plane that go through the atmosphere and splash in the ocean. And the whole way down, they're sending back temperature, pressure, wind speed, and all of that is sent back to the National Hurricane Center, and that's what they use to help figure out exactly how strong the hurricane is. And you're looking at some of the video we had from earlier. It was a remarkable experience. Parts of it were incredibly beautiful when we were in the eye of the hurricane and you just saw blue sky overhead, but then you looked around and you had a ring of extremely tall and threatening looking thunderstorm clouds, and you could just tell that there was so much fury surrounding that really serene, peaceful eye with all the blue sky. Kevin and Carrie Lee.
Ryan, I got to ask you, I mean, how much different is this than a typical commercial airlines flight? Did you feel a lot of turbulence? I mean, people at home are going, you went into the eye of a hurricane.
So, yeah, that's a great question. So it's a C-130. It's like a cargo plane. So you don't really get any recline. You're sort of sitting on sort of like a nylon mesh back and a little fold-out chair, a seat there. But to be honest, the turbulence was not bad at all. It would be sort of like a bad commercial flight for turbulence, but it wasn't anything that was out there. Never once felt sick. And the hurricane hunters told me that most of their flights are like that. It's the hurricanes that are falling apart rapidly or the ones that are intensifying rapidly that tend to have the worst turbulence. So it's really how quickly they're changing that can lead to more turbulence, as opposed to this one, which is sort of a steady state, maybe weakening a little bit. And as Josh mentioned, the winds with Florence are down, guys, and that was the data that was sent back from the hurricane hunters while we were on it. Every time they sent one of the tubes down that records all the data, I went up to the weather officer. I'm like, okay, what's it show? What do we have for winds? What's the latest data? And so they were able to use that data at the Hurricane Center in Miami and say the winds have come down some.
And right, of course, you know, whenever there's a commercial flight and it's a little turbulent, it can be kind of scary. And, you know, often flights are grounded or they don't go up in that kind of weather. What is the difference here with this kind of airplane? I mean, what makes it safe to do it in this situation?
Well, I mean, they're C-130s. I mean, so they're giant cargo planes. I mean, these things are beasts, and they're, you know, you'd see them used. You know, the Army would use them overseas to transport things into ideal conditions. It's got 4 propellers. They really are able to withstand a lot of G-forces, a lot of strength, a lot of torque, and so they're able to actually withstand going through these giant updrafts and downdrafts. So a commercial airliner would certainly never fly through a hurricane, but these things are designed. They have a really great safety track record as well. In the last several decades, there has not been one serious incident with a hurricane hunter plane. And the people who do this, I mean, they're Air Force reservists. They're based in Biloxi, Mississippi. And so what they do is they fly to wherever the storm is closest. So they're based in Savannah for the next week. So these reservists have left their family and they're stuck here in Savannah, flying back and forth into hurricanes pretty much nonstop until the threat ends. And so it was incredible to see all the teamwork come together and all the different pieces, all the cogs to the wheel to try to get the flight off the ground on time, and then all the different pieces of data and information that they were recording, getting it sent back to the National Hurricane Center.
Ryan, we look forward to more of your reports, Ryan, with potentially life-saving information from the eye of the storm. We appreciate it. Ryan Hanrahan, our chief meteorologist, live for us tonight in Savannah, Georgia.
Thanks so much, Ryan. We were just talking about this airlines. They are starting to cancel more flights, commercial airlines, as Hurricane Florence approaches the East Coast. Already
30 inches of rain in areas of Wilmington from this storm, in addition to devastating storm surges expected. We'll talk more about this hurricane and more about your local forecast here in just a few minutes. Guys, back to you.
Josh, thanks. Now to an up-close look at the coverage of Hurricane Florence. You're not going to see this on any other station. So today, our own chief meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan and photojournalist Dave Mulligan flew straight into the eye of Florence with the National Hurricane Hunters.
And this is video of the plane they boarded in Savannah, Georgia, just before they got on. And Ryan and Dave spent about 10 hours crisscrossing through the storm. Now, if you follow this line, you see that's the route the plane took. The hurricane hunters use these flights to predict the path of the storm, gather data. This all can help save lives. Ryan joins us now with his one-of-a-kind trip.
We're here in Savannah, Georgia, where the U.S. Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters are basing their operations for Hurricane Florence. Today we had a 10-hour flight from here in Savannah into the eye of Hurricane Florence. We crisscrossed Florence about 4 different times. We went through the Eyewall and into the eye 4 times in one of these big C-130 planes. And the goal of these missions is to determine how strong a hurricane is and how big the hurricane is. How much space does it take up? All of those are very important pieces of information that meteorologists use to issue forecasts and warnings. This is some video from inside the Hurricane Hunter plane earlier this afternoon, and you can see us flying into the eye of the storm. Notice it's totally sunny in the eye, but all around you see this very ominous, these very tall, nearly 60,000 foot tall thunderstorms that ring around the eye, and that's where the worst of the storm is. The winds where we were at flight level were over 140 miles per hour in the height of the storm, and the U.S. Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters will be flying into and out of Florence for the next several days until the storm makes landfall. In Savannah, Georgia, I'm Ryan Hanrahan. Now back to you.
Right, nice job, Ryan. Really interesting trip. And Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan will continue to bring us a first-hand look at conditions before, during, and after Florence. Tune in each day for his exclusive. Florence is expected to make landfall late Thursday or Friday.
We have team coverage from inside the hurricane to connections right here in Connecticut. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan took a ride on the Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter. He's taking us right into the eye of the storm.
We spent about 10 hours aboard this aircraft. It's a C-130 that's flown by the U.S. Air Force Reserve, the Hurricane Hunters, and we took this plane into the eye of Hurricane Florence. We made 4 passes into the eye of Florence, and the goal of this mission was to try to figure out how strong Hurricane Florence was and where it was moving. What is the direction of its movement? While we were out here today, we saw an incredibly beautiful eye, but a very frightening scene. And you're going to see some of these images right now. As we flew through the eye, the sky just lit up with bright blue. The sun was out, but all around you can see a very threatening, ominous ring of thunderstorm clouds around it. The pressure of the storm stayed about the same the entire time we were out there, so it really didn't strengthen and it didn't really weaken either. And the hurricane hunters are going to be flying into Florence between now and landfall sometime later this week. In Savannah, Georgia, I'm Ryan Hanrahan, NBC Connecticut News. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Ryan. And Ryan will continue to bring us first-hand looks at the conditions before, during, and even after Florence. Stay with NBC Connecticut for his live down as it slams into the East Coast, and that is going to cause some major flooding problems. We want to start with our team coverage with Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan.
Now, Ryan took a ride through the eye of the storm earlier today with the hurricane hunters. He joins us live now from Wilmington, North Carolina, with more on that ride and the new hurricane advisory. Ryan.
Yeah, we just got that new 11 o'clock advisory in from the National Hurricane Center, and a bit of good news here, and that is that the hurricane has weakened some, now down from a Category 3 hurricane to a Category 2 hurricane. Let's take a look at the satellite loop, and you can see Florence is taking on a somewhat more ragged appearance. There's some southerly wind shear that is sort of disrupting the southern half of the eye of Florence, and that has caused the intensity of the storm to diminish some. Still, though, as we take a look at the specifics from the National Hurricane Center as of 11 o'clock, the winds a very formidable 110 miles per hour. The pressure has come up to 957 millibars, and that indicates that there has been some weakening going on. The storm's moving to the northwest now at 17 miles per hour, so it's still moving pretty quickly toward the Carolina coast. Let's take a look at the wind field associated with Florence, because as you mentioned at the top of the show, even though the winds are slowing down some, it's actually growing in size. Florence is becoming extremely large, and that means there's going to be a very prolonged period of very strong winds. So starting tomorrow at 3 p.m., we've got tropical storm force winds from the Outer Banks of North Carolina down to about Myrtle Beach. We'll fast forward to 8 p.m., and as we head toward Thursday evening, the winds will be picking up over 60 miles per hour where I am here in Wilmington. And then by 11:30 and into the wee hours of Friday morning, the winds will gust up to and potentially even over 100 miles per hour along the southeastern coast of North Carolina. Now, the wind is just one factor. We've got a devastating storm surge of over 10 feet that is possible here on the North Carolina coast. And inland, there's going to be a tremendous amount of rain. Our computer models are still projecting somewhere on the order of 2 feet of rain in a good chunk of eastern North Carolina. So it's really three different factors here that people are worried about. One, the damaging wind. Two would be the storm surge along the coast. And three, the inland flooding from all that fresh water that's going to be coming down with all that rain, over 2 feet of rain. Now, one of the reasons we know Hurricane Florence is weakening a bit this evening is because the hurricane hunters have been flying through the storm all day. And actually, earlier today, they invited us, NBC Connecticut, on one of those hurricane hunter flights. We left Savannah, Georgia. We flew into the eye of the hurricane, giving us and our viewers an exclusive look at Hurricane Florence you won't see anywhere else. There's only one way to determine the exact strength of a storm like Florence. The 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron of the U.S. Air Force Reserve, better known as the Hurricane Hunters, has been chasing hurricanes by plane for decades. These missions are done for one reason, and that's to help people in the path of dangerous storms like Florence.
Me and most everybody else that does these flights are basically, we like helping people.
It's hard to overstate how much the data collected by the flight helps.
This is a drop zone. It's dropped from the plane down into the ocean below. Measures all sorts of things, but primarily we're interested in temperature, atmospheric pressure, and wind speed. The 8 minutes or so it takes for the drop zone to fall from the plane to splash into the ocean, it's able to send back hundreds of vital atmospheric measurements.
We're taking all this information. It's all live info, real data, and we're taking that into being sent to the National Hurricane Center. They take that data and turn it into the forecast and stuff you see on television.
To get the most useful data, the C-130 punches through the Eyewall, the most vicious part of Florence, where winds were clocked at over 140 miles per hour at flight level. Beyond the Eyewall is stunning beauty. The calm and serene 30-mile wide Eye of Florence was awash in sunlight and surrounded by a ring of monstrous 60,000-foot tall thunderstorms. We crossed into the eye 4 different times, each time sampling a different quadrant. The flights are long and the hours can be grueling, but the hurricane hunters know the data they collect saves lives.
They're adjusting our data. It actually increases the forecast between 25 and 35% for the models, and then in turn that increases the accuracy for the intensity and the track forecast.
We'll do it no matter what. We enjoy what we do, and we know it has a big purpose.
And the hurricane hunters aren't done with their work either yet, Mike. They are going to be crisscrossing that storm, heading in and out of the eye of Hurricane Florence until the eye makes landfall. So they're going to be out, and they've got a lot of work ahead of them.
Ryan, we are so fortunate. So few people get a chance to do this. Help us understand what it's like to go through the Eyewall. Does the plane shake dramatically, or is it a smooth ride?
So I was expecting, we had to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was expecting a really bumpy flight. I thought the turbulence would be pretty crazy. They say sometimes it can be quite bad, and they pass out the air sickness bags. But our first trip through the Eyewall, it was almost perfectly calm, and apparently sometimes very strong hurricanes that aren't really rapidly intensifying or rapidly weakening, sort of at a steady state. Apparently sometimes the turbulence isn't all that bad. So more than anything else, it was just sort of a glimpse into Mother Nature's beauty. At the same time, these scientists on board are gathering literally hundreds or thousands of pieces of information and transmitting it back instantaneously, so people on the coast can know what to expect as Florence begins its trek toward North and South Carolina.
And the pictures were absolutely stunning, Ryan. Thank you for taking us for a ride. We're obviously going to have your live reports thrown up tomorrow when this hits into the coast. Ryan Hanrahan live in Wilmington tonight.
Great report there, Ryan. All right, more than 1 million people have been warned to get out of the way of Hurricane Florence. Some are headed to our state or at least passing through. NBC Connecticut's Matt Austin continues our live team coverage. He's in Milford. Matt.
Yeah, Carrie, late tonight we caught up with people who are not taking.
And joined them on their flight through Hurricane Florence, 4 times. He joins us live on the phone from Wilmington, North Carolina with more. Good morning, Ryan. And how are the conditions there in North Carolina?
Hey, Bob. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Right now, it's actually not so bad. There's a little bit of a breeze. It's warm and humid, but the rain bands from Hurricane Florence are still pretty far offshore. So it looks like we've got another, I'd say, 6 or 8 hours before things really start to go downhill here.
What was your feeling there? What was the flight like yesterday? We tracked it here using our MAX machines. What was it like to be in that C-130?
Bob, it was incredible. What I thought we would experience is not actually what happened. I thought it was going to be a really bumpy flight with lots of turbulence going into the eye of the hurricane. It was still a Category 4 when we got into the Hurricane Hunter plane. But believe it or not, the flight was actually very smooth. I even slept through the first maybe 2 hours of the flight. We hadn't gotten much sleep, but it was so smooth. It was hard to believe you were going through such a violent hurricane. And the entire time we were there was about a 10.5-hour flight. Scientists on board reflect all sorts of data that was sent back to the National Hurricane Center. So things like temperature, wind speed, pressure at flight level, and also down to the ocean surface. And all of that was being transmitted back to the National Hurricane Center. And some of that data is what they used to downgrade the hurricane from a Category 4 to a 3, and then eventually last night to a Category 2. So the hope here in North Carolina is that weakening trend continues, but still 30 inches of rain, 110-mile-per-hour winds. This is a very powerful hurricane, and people are taking it very seriously.
Ryan, what do you want people to take away from the mission, particularly being inside of the storm? Do you think that there's more that folks can learn from seeing it at that angle?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that, these Air Force reservists are based out in Mississippi, and they literally come wherever the storm is. So they're stationed here for a week, maybe 10 days, waiting for Hurricane Florence to move in. And they're pretty much dedicating their entire hurricane season to keeping people safe and giving people information about just how strong these storms are before they move in. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to track these hurricanes. We don't just look at them from satellites and radars, but you've got people that are flying into and out of storms, crisscrossing these hurricanes day in and day out. There's multiple missions a day. So these storms, we do a very good job, the United States does, of tracking these hurricanes and investing a lot of money in making sure we know where they're going and we know how strong they are so they don't surprise us when they hit land.
So, Ryan, if you can sleep in a C-130, something tells me you might be able to catch a couple more Z's before this storm gets any closer. So we're going to free you up for that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
But
thanks, guys.
Go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying thank you. And we're going to be riding out the storm here in Wilmington, and we're a couple miles inland. So we're in a safe place. We're outside of the storm surge zone. So we'll keep you posted as the storm moves in.
All right. Catch a nap. He's going to stay on top of the storm, as he said, and we will have live coverage. Reports from North Carolina as Florence prepares to...
Now to our coverage of Hurricane Florence on NBC Connecticut. First Alert Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan flew through the storm yesterday. We showed you that. It was incredible. Well, today he's on the ground in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Ryan's live for us. So, Ryan, give us a sense of how conditions have changed throughout the day where you are and how things are right now.
Yeah, Kevin and Carrie Lee, most of the day the weather was actually fine. The sun was out earlier today. The breeze was stiff, but it wasn't all that bad. Things have gone downhill literally in the last 20 minutes. We're getting that first real outer rain band of Hurricane Florence that's backing in. Lester mentioned, and Al mentioned as well, that the eye of Hurricane Florence still about 100 miles from here in Wilmington, from Wilmington, North Carolina, and that Eyewall and that outer rain band beginning to move in a full 100 miles from the storm center. So here's where we are right now. Over here, this is the Cape Fear River, which empties into the Atlantic Ocean, and you can see with the wind coming down the river, already some white caps starting to form. I'd say winds are gusting on the order of 40, maybe 45 or 50 miles per hour. No damage, no power outages here quite yet, but the concern is going to be over the next coming hours, and especially later tonight and tomorrow. We've got two problems. One is all sorts of freshwater flooding coming down the river. At the same time, storm surge flooding from the Atlantic is going to come up the river, and that's going to cause all sorts of problems, not to mention the fact we're going to be dealing with winds up to and maybe even over 100 miles per hour during the worst part of the storm. Now, as we were traveling around today, one of the biggest problems people who live in Wilmington and eastern North Carolina were having was trying to find gas and getting some last-minute supplies. Pretty much everything was closed today. Most gas stations, I'd say 90% of them, were either closed or didn't have any gas left. We did find one gas station that was open near Wrightsville Beach, and many people were waiting in a long line to try to fill up some gas cans for their generators and also top off their tanks.
All right, Ryan, so earlier, we've been watching the scene obviously change in North Carolina and the Carolinas. Earlier, people were out and about sort of getting a little bit confident that it was downgraded to a 2. But it sounds like meteorologists are saying don't worry about the number. We're still expecting, obviously, strong winds and those storm surges, et cetera. Are people kind of hunkering down now that we're feeling the effects of the storm?
Yeah, it's really a mixture, I'd say. Some people who were thinking about leaving when it was a 4 decided to stay at the last minute because it was downgraded. Other people sort of understand that, yeah, even though the wind speed has come down, the threat from flooding from 2 feet or more of rain, which is expected, is going to cause all sorts of problems. So the flooding threat, I think people are really paying attention to closely. And the issue is going to be, as we go through time, is going to be that storm surge coming in from the Atlantic and the freshwater flooding coming down from the north. And 2 feet of rain here in Wilmington would be an all-time record. They have not had that kind of rain before from a hurricane. So I think that's what most people are concerned about. And everyone's taking precautions. I'd say there's a good amount of people who decided to stay at the last minute. So they're hoping that the weakening trend we've seen with Florence continues. But I wouldn't count on that. This is still a real monster storm out in the Atlantic, guys.
Hey, Ryan, one more quick question. You guys traveled from Savannah, Georgia yesterday to Wilmington up I-95, 3.5, 4-hour drive. What was that like? Were most folks getting out of Dodge, or was it clear sailing for you guys?
Well, for us, we were driving up from Georgia, so there was basically no traffic at all. We had I-95 pretty much all to ourselves from Savannah up to where south of the border is on the South Carolina-North Carolina line. You know where that is if you've ever driven south. So there was very little traffic. There was a lot of traffic going in the opposite direction, people trying to leave South Carolina. So especially from the Charleston area and Columbia, people were driving south, some as far south as Georgia and also even Jacksonville, Florida. So a lot of people were moving south, but no one was really following us, with the exception of tree trimming crews. We saw a lot of those, and also a lot of Florida Light and Power crews and Duke Energy crews sort of heading up the coast to stage before what's promises to be a pretty big restoration effort once we get those 100-mile-per-hour winds in here.
All right. Thanks so much, Ryan. We'll continue to check in with you. Be safe. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan in the middle of it there in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah, great stuff, Ryan. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon. All right, with Hurricane Florence moving ashore, airports in the area are shutting down operations. Here's the scene of Myrtle Beach. The airport empty. Nearly every flight leaving Myrtle canceled. Many airlines are allowing passengers to rebook their flights at no extra cost.
This is a live look at the arrivals and
live look right now.
She's Keisha Grant. I'm Mike Heidick. The size of this storm, bigger than North and South Carolina combined. It's expected to slam the coast overnight. Right now, Florence is a Category 2, but do not be fooled. This will be a devastating storm. Some of these storm surges could reach 13 feet high. Over 16,000 people are without power. That's in North Carolina alone.
And while millions have evacuated ahead of this massive hurricane, we are taking you into the storm. Our team coverage begins with Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan live in Wilmington, North Carolina. He's got the new advisory on Florence. And Ryan, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, Keisha, the winds are picking up here for sure. We're getting a little bit of a break from the rain, only some light rain, but the center of the storm, the eye of Hurricane Florence, is still more than 100 miles from us, and it looks like we don't get landfall. That eye is not going to cross us here in Wilmington, North Carolina, until it looks like 2 p.m. tomorrow. So we've got another almost full day where conditions will go downhill. Let's take a look at the latest numbers coming in from the National Hurricane Center. I want to start things off with live first alert Doppler radar. You can see the storm. You can see the classic Eyewall with those brighter reds and yellows surrounding the eye. We're located in Wilmington, which is, again, a little more than 100 miles from the eye, and the storm is only very slowly drifting to the west. We did get a bit of good news with the wind speeds coming down from the National Hurricane Center. This is the 5 o'clock advisory. Current wind speeds with the storm 100 miles per hour. The pressure holding steady right around 955 millibars. But the current movement and the forward speed of the hurricane has slowed down substantially. Now it's moving to the west-northwest at 5 miles per hour, and that's going to be a problem because we're talking about hurricane force winds along the coast of North Carolina that may last 20, 24, maybe even 30 hours. So it's going to be a long duration event with all sorts of problems, including storm surge flooding and lots of trees and power lines coming down. Let's take a look at the winds right now. We're gusting up to 45 miles per hour at the Wilmington airport. The winds here downtown have been about the same. So we're gusting up to tropical storm force, but I am expecting hurricane force winds to be close by during our 11 o'clock newscast tonight. Now, so many people have evacuated because of Hurricane Florence. Lots of people moved inland to get away from the shore, but we have seen a number of people coming into Wilmington for the storm, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we've got first responders and also lines crews and tree crews coming in, but we also found one volunteer.
Closed or full? I'm here actually to help with the water rescue efforts. After the volunteers are given the green light to go, just came down to see if anyone wanted to help, certified as a rescue swimmer and swift water rescue tech, so thought it'd be a help.
Yes, that guy drove all the way from Louisiana to get to here in Wilmington because he knows flooding is going to be such a problem. Now, he's a certified swift water rescue swimmer, so he said, you know, they probably are going to need some help here, so I should come up. So he drove. He's actually staying in a parking garage near here in his car, and when things get bad, when the flooding kicks in, he says he's going to be volunteering. So the concern here is really going to be the flooding. We've got two issues. One is going to be the storm surge coming up from the Atlantic Ocean here in the Cape Fear River, and the second issue is going to be the freshwater flooding. This is the rainfall forecast from Florence. You can see rainfall amounts that in some locations may exceed 2 feet, and that is going to cause significant flooding both here near the coast and also inland, and all that water is going to come down, and people are very concerned about the flood threat here with Hurricane Florence as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. Mike and Keisha will send things back over to you.
Ryan, when people are native of coastal states, they often think they're tough enough to ride out some of these storms, even if there's a huge storm surge on the way. Are you hearing that from people downtown?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is a bit of complacency, as you mentioned at the top of the show, because of that downgrade. It was a Category 4. Now it's a Category 2. I mean, that's a big difference. The storm has certainly weakened. But the problem is going to be all of the flooding. Even though the wind speed has weakened, the rainfall forecast has stayed the same, over 2 feet of rain, which would smash the all-time record rainfall here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And this is an area that's very prone to flooding. So even though the wind damage threat may have come down some, the storm surge threat remains very high, and the inland flooding threat, I think that's what we're going to be talking a lot about. Remember what happened during Harvey around Houston. So much rain, nowhere for it to go, and that led to all sorts of flooding issues. So yes, I do think there is a little bit of complacency, especially once the downgrade happened. People were on the fence about leaving, decided, hey, you know, maybe we're going to tough this out. They're just hoping, you know, we're still 18 to 24 hours before landfall. I mean, it still could strengthen as it heads toward land. So we're hoping that doesn't happen for sure.
Ryan, you described this as a long duration event. People could be in the thick of this for a while once the storm moves on to land. The people that you've spoken with, are they prepared for what could come in the hours and days ahead?
Yeah, I think so, Keisha. This is an area that's pretty prone to hurricanes. They've had a lot of bad ones in the past. So I think people know that they should be able to be stuck in their house and can handle it for 7 days or so. So lots of people have stocked up on water, non-perishable foods. We have as well, actually. We raided a Walmart in Georgia when we got here and got as much food and water as we could. Lots of people are getting gasoline as well. So I think people realize that it's going to be a long duration event, and I think that they are prepared for that. One of the problems is going to be, though, once the waters start rising, if some of the forecasts are right, we could see inland flooding in places that have never really flooded before. And I think the concern here among emergency managers and the police and fire department in Wilmington and the county sheriff is going to be, well, what happens when the water starts rising as the hurricane moves in, and you have these people who didn't necessarily evacuate, and they may be talking about these rivers coming out of their banks and flooding homes. And I think that's the big wild card here, and that does have everyone concerned.
Wow. Well, he's, of course, speaking about the natives who are used to this. We know that we have so many folks here from Connecticut who have moved there. We have family members there.
We do. My mother-in-law's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an older city, too, so a lot of historic houses, not incredibly strong to withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds, or if they get downgraded, even serious winds. These houses are old, and they haven't been, ready for this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
We are hoping for the best for them. Ryan Hanrahan joining us live there from Wilmington, North Carolina. You stay safe as well. Thank you. And you'll definitely
are continuing to keep a very close eye on Hurricane Florence right now. This is the latest live first alert Doppler radar loop, and you can see Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan live in Wilmington. That's about 105 miles away from the eye. We're going to bring Ryan in right now. And Ryan, can you just talk me through the conditions right now? It looks like some of those outer bands are starting to move through. How are things out there right now?
Well, they're not getting better, that's for sure. The weather is definitely getting worse. We're gusting, I'd say, somewhere between 40 and 50 miles per hour. The rain is picking up as well, but this is really nothing compared to what we're going to be getting tomorrow. And it looks like the eye of the storm, Josh, is not going to cross us here in Wilmington until 2 o'clock tomorrow. So think about that. We've got, that's 18, 20 hours to go before the real worst of the storm gets here.
And Ryan, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the worst part of this storm. We're talking winds that could gust over 100 miles per hour in Wilmington. What's your plan down there when these winds arrive? I mean, do you have a plan to remain safe?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So first things first is as soon as things really start to go downhill, we're going to head back to our hotel. We're away from the water, so we're not in a storm surge or a flood zone, which is great because we really wanted to be sure we weren't going to be in a situation where water was a factor. It's a 5-story hotel. It can withstand some very strong winds, so we're going to be in a safe spot when the worst of the storm comes in. And there's a lot of people here in Wilmington who are doing just that, Josh, who have come in from the barrier beaches and are staying downtown, especially up on the hill a little bit away from the water.
And Ryan, you had the opportunity yesterday to ride along with the Hurricane Hunters, a C-130 aircraft, and they're out again right now surveying it. We have it up on the screen kind of showing the Hurricane Hunter moving through, and it took off from Savannah. Talk me through exactly what they're measuring.
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to join one of those Hurricane Hunter flights yesterday. And it was about a 10.5-hour flight, and what they're doing is they're going through the core of the storm. So they're going through the eyewall and the eye, and they're dropping instrument packets every few miles, or every, let's say, 15 or 20 minutes in the storm. So they're getting different atmospheric variables, the wind speed, the pressure, the humidity. All of those things are transmitted back to the National Hurricane Center so they can figure out the storm's strength. And those Hurricane Hunter flights, the one that's out there today and the ones that have been out there this morning, have shown the storm has weakened some. Florence was a Category 4, now it's a Category 2, and we're hoping that we don't see things spin back up. There's very warm water. It's over the Gulf Stream right now, so the Hurricane Center is expecting the strength to stay about the same, but the Hurricane Hunters are going to be in there crisscrossing the eye of the hurricane to figure out exactly what this storm is doing and helping the Hurricane Center figure out what the storm will do as it heads toward land. And they're going to be continuing those reconnaissance missions right on through landfall. They will continue to fly into the storm until the eye of Hurricane Florence makes landfall here in North Carolina.
And Ryan, that's still about 12 to 18 hours away. We saw in the last report, it's moving at a snail's pace right now, 5 miles per hour. Do you expect them to find some similar data with regard to how slow it's moving?
Yeah, absolutely. So what they do is they find they fix a center. So they take a look at their onboard radar, and the Hurricane Hunters can find exactly the latitude and longitude of the eye of the hurricane. So they're going to be looking at the storm slowing down. But one of the biggest concerns, Josh, and we've been talking about this all along, is that it's supposed to slow down to almost a stationary movement, as you said, a snail's pace as it heads toward the coast of North Carolina. So that amplifies all sorts of things, such as heavy rain, the potential for wind damage as well. And I think one of the biggest concerns going forward is how slow it's moving, how much rain it's dropping, and how long we're going to be dealing with hurricane-force winds on the coast, because it's not one of those storms that's flying on through. This thing is crawling on shore.
Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan live for us in Wilmington, North Carolina. Ryan, stay safe out there. We'll check in with you again soon. And, of course, Ryan will have exclusive live reports through Hurricane Florence in the days following. Tune in each night for coverage on the storm you won't see on any other station.
Excellent reporting. All right. Thanks so much, John.
Flights in the region have been canceled through Friday, and more than 60,000 people are already without power. Our team coverage continues as Florence begins to bear down on the Carolinas. We want to begin with Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan. He's sure to be in the thick of things live in Wilmington, North Carolina. Ryan, what's it like there?
Keisha, the winds are picking up as Florence inches, and it is just crawling toward the coast. It's still about 100 miles offshore from us. The winds here are gusting over 40 miles per hour. and we're expecting by sometime tomorrow morning winds in excess of 100 miles per hour. So the wind, that's one concern, obviously. The second concern is going to be heavy rain. We're looking at over 2 feet of rain here in Wilmington, which could lead to epic and catastrophic flash flooding away from the coast. And right along the beaches, storm surge is another huge threat. As you mentioned, 9 to 13 feet of storm surge, and then waves on top of that coming into some of the barrier beaches here. Today we were standing right here in Wilmington, and we actually ran into one man. He actually came up to us and said, hey, you're from Connecticut. He moved to Wilmington, North Carolina 10 days ago from Fairfield, and he says it's just his luck he moves down, and there's a big hurricane that comes in a week and a half later.
I was leaving there to escape the stress, and it's 10 times worse here. It's pretty scary, as you can see by the water.
Mike Mazzella moved from Fairfield to Wilmington by the Cape Fear River just over a week ago. He says he's ready, but he's also very nervous.
I'm all hunkered up at the house. Everything's all boarded up. I have water for 7 days, canned goods for 7 days.
Most gas stations have been out of gas since yesterday. Most stores downtown are boarded up. The decision to stay or evacuate has been an excruciating one for people like Kevin Holmes. How come you didn't evacuate?
We just didn't really think that it would be that bad. We have lots of animals and nowhere to put them.
This downtown business is open, but with some extra customers. 8 people and 7 dogs will be riding out the storm in a kava bar because it's in a sturdy building.
We got a generator out back. We're hunkered down. We got food, water. We should be fine. We're in a higher level. We're not worried about flooding.
While many evacuated inland, some came to the water, including this swiftwater rescue swimmer from Louisiana who wanted to volunteer.
A lot of places are understaffed when a natural disaster like this hits, especially when they're dealing with such a large group of people. So I feel like it's important that everyone that is trained should. The whole reason we get trained is to help the people, so might as well use those skills to help the people while we can.
Eastern North Carolina is on edge tonight, hoping for a weaker Florence, but bracing for what is expected to be a devastating strike.
Our whole neighborhood's staying, so, so it's we'll all help each other out if we have to.
It was a Category 4, now it's down to a Category 2. There is still some room for intensification as Florence moves over the Gulf Stream and heads into North Carolina. People here are praying that is not going to happen. Even though the wind speeds have come down, the flood threat from both storm surge and inland flooding remains high, and everyone we've talked to is very concerned about the amount of water that Florence is going to drop on eastern North Carolina. We're live in Wilmington, North Carolina tonight. I'm Ryan Hanrahan, NBC Connecticut News. Mike and Keisha will send things back over to you.
That rain picking up there, Ryan, we heard that gentleman say that he didn't think it would be that bad. Is that the sentiment that you're hearing on the streets there from folks who are choosing to ride out this storm? They hear Category 2 and they're thinking it may not be so bad.
Yeah, I do think there is a lot of complacency, Keisha. People who are maybe on the fence. I mean, some people, when they saw this thing as a Cat 4, they said, to heck with this. I'm going inland. I'm getting away from this thing. But there were some people who I'm sure were on the fence. And we talked to a few people like this. They weren't really sure. They've got a lot of pets at home, and they don't really have a place to go. And so when they saw that decrease in intensity, they made the decision to stay. The problem is going to be, we're going to go through the eyewall of this storm for something like 12 to 18 hours. So the fact that it's moving so slowly, even though the wind speeds have come down, could make the damage just as bad as a more significant storm. And of course, the amount of water, the amount of rain, and the storm surge is going to be a big problem all across southeastern North Carolina.
Ryan, we are hoping for their safety, and you stay safe as well. Thank you so much. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan joining us live from Wilmington, North Carolina.
And a lot of people rain along the coast so far, and it's going to stick around for a while. And about 12,000 people who stayed behind are now in shelters trying to stay away from the storm.
And Mike, the new hurricane advisory just came in. We've got live team coverage breaking it down for you. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan starts us off with the very latest on Florence. He is live for us tonight in Wilmington, North Carolina, where things are starting to pick up there. But Ryan, this storm is crawling.
Yeah, you could say that for sure, Keisha and Mike. Things are definitely picking up here. We've seen transformers blowing in the distance. We actually still have power somehow where we are at this gas station. There's still gas in the gas pumps, but the winds are picking up for sure. Let's take a look at the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. A bit of good news. The storm has weakened again, now down to a Category 1 hurricane with winds of 90 miles per hour. But already on shore, we've seen gusts as high as 100 miles per hour. just to the east of here. So you can see the center of that storm still to the east of us on Live First Alert Doppler radar. And here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Winds of 90 miles per hour again. It's just crawling to the west, crawling toward the coast. And one of the problems with Florence is going to be how long we're going to be in conditions that will get much worse than this. It's going to be a very, very long duration storm because of its very slow motion to the west, just crawling over toward the coast. Now, as you can see, we've got a lot of rain here, and rain is going to be a big problem with the wind. Winds gusting here in Wilmington over 50 miles per hour. By tomorrow morning, we expect gusts 90 to 100. And the rain is going to be a huge factor as well. Major freshwater flooding is expected in and around eastern North Carolina, along with major storm surge flooding on the barrier islands. Now, with conditions like this, of course, we haven't seen too many people out tonight, but we did find two guys who were here at this gas station when we drove by just a little bit ago. Here's what they had to say. So we've been driving around and we haven't seen anyone out besides cops and firefighters. And then we saw you two guys by the red box machine at the Shell station. What are you doing in the middle of a hurricane?
Well, really, to tell you the truth, I'm just trying to get through this miserable acquaintance or happening or whatever. I feel for those who have, had to board up and all that kind of stuff and endure all this. I hope nobody's hurt. But,
Are you ready for the storm?
Oh yeah, I got the house boarded up and we got a generator and all that kind of stuff. So we prepared a long time ago.
So a lot of people are prepared. A lot of people evacuated out of the barrier islands, which are about a mile to the south of here, Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach. They came inland. We're away from a storm surge zone, so there's no mandatory evacuation here. But the concern is what happens late tonight and tomorrow morning. It looks like the worst of the storm here in Wilmington, probably not until 6 or 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Josh, we're going to send things back over to you.
And Ryan, it looks like some strong winds moving through there. I'm looking at radar right now. We have one of those outer bands starting to move in. 10 hours away from landfall there in Wilmington. What can you say about the category? We're talking about a Category 1 hurricane, but that really doesn't tell the story. This is far more than that.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. So the winds have come down, which is great. I mean, it's hard to believe standing here right now talking about the winds coming down. So we're not talking about a Category 4 hurricane, which would have been able to take the roofs off houses and businesses around here. But the concerns with storm surge flooding and the concerns with heavy rain remain. We're still forecasting over 2 feet of rain here in parts of eastern North Carolina, which would be an all-time record. And with that amount of rain, we're going to see flooding on rivers that is going to be just devastating. And that, I think, the freshwater flooding is what everyone's going to remember from Hurricane Florence, Josh.
At 4:39, we want to take you into the storm. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan is right in the thick of things. He's been covering the storm for us in Wilmington, North Carolina. Good morning, Ryan. What are you seeing there this morning?
Good morning, Ted and Shannon. The wind is certainly picking up. We're gusting to about hurricane force here now. That's about 74, 75 miles per hour. The rain's not too bad currently, but the wind is a big story. As I look off in the distance, I can see big flashes, big bright blue flashes as transformers start to blow all across the city of Wilmington. The big story is what's been happening, though, down by the barrier beaches here from near Wrightsville Beach and especially up to the north. We know that there's been a lot of really serious storm surge flooding. There's been a lot of inundation in some areas that are closer to the center of Florence. I'm not sure if we have it, but we can throw up live First Alert Doppler radar. I can show you where we are in Wrightsville, in Wilmington. Sorry, maybe a little hard to hear with this wind coming through. We are about 10 or 15 miles from the Eyewall, and that Eyewall, where you see the really bright oranges and yellows sort of spiraling around the center of the storm, that's about to move in here, and we're expecting wind gusts up to 90, maybe even 100 miles per hour as that moves in, Ted and Shannon.
Yeah, and as that Eyewall, Ryan, moves closer to you, you said 90 to 100 mile per hour winds. What other sort of changes are you going to notice right away once the Eyewall reaches you?
Well, the wind is probably going to shift direction some, and I think the big story that even though the winds are really going to pick up is that in some respects, in terms of wind, we sort of dodged a bullet. I mean, 90 to 100 mile an hour wind gusts in Wilmington, that's going to be bad, but it certainly could have been a whole lot worse. It was a Category 4 just about 48 hours ago. But I still think the bigger story is what's going to happen over the weekend with the rainfall forecast. It looks like now anywhere between 2 and 3 feet of rain is going to come down. So this is after the eye passes, after the storm moves into South Carolina. We're just going to see constant heavy rain. And a lot of the local rivers here, we're expecting to crest near record levels, and that's going to do a lot of damage. And I think when we remember Hurricane Florence, it probably won't be for the wind damage, but it's going to be for the inland flooding and what it's doing on the barrier beaches right now, which from what we've seen are in really rough shape.
All right, Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan in Wilmington, North Carolina this morning. Ryan, make sure you stay safe. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and we will continue to check in with you throughout the morning.
All right, Bob Maxon also watching the storm this morning. Bob, we're looking at that part of the area as far as Wilmington goes. What are we expecting as far as that entire region here over the course of the next few hours?
Now, NBC Connecticut's first alert weather. Connecticut's most accurate forecast, certified by Weather Rate.
Well, yeah, as Ryan mentioned, the weather is significantly going downhill. And I'm just take a look at the modeled wind gusts that go along with this. And there's that eye of the storm that left the west wall of the eye is now working its way toward Wilmington. And the wind gusts, of course, ramp up into the 70s and 80s and possibly even over 90 to 100 miles per hour. And then the winds do start to diminish, as Ryan mentioned.
Carolina.
Yeah, he's showing us the elements the Carolinas are feeling right now.
Good morning, Ted and Shannon. We are in the thick of the storm right now. We've got winds this morning that have gusted here in Wilmington up to hurricane force. But the worst of the storm, believe it or not, is still to the east of us. It's about 10 or 20 miles east. That's where the eye wall of Hurricane Florence is, and that's going to be moving through as we go through the morning. The good news is the wind speeds with Florence have come down. It's now a Category 1 hurricane, so I think the wind damage, there will be a lot of trees and power lines that come down, but the structural damage will be pretty limited from the wind. Different story, though, along the coast. We know there has been very serious storm surge flooding from the Outer Banks all the way down to very close to where we are here near Wrightsville Beach. And unfortunately, it looks like the storm surge is going to continue to be a major factor on the barrier islands. The other big factor that hasn't changed at all is going to be the inland flooding. Over 2 feet of rain is expected once you get inland, and that is going to cause near record levels of flooding on many local rivers and streams here in eastern North Carolina. So even though the winds have come down, the threat is still there, and the threat is quite high for a very substantial storm and a very substantial impact as we go through the morning. In Wilmington, North Carolina, I'm Ryan Hanrahan, NBC Connecticut News. Back to you.
I think it's certainly starting to pick up there. Keep it locked right here for Ryan's exclusive live reports from the ground as the worst of Hurricane Florence hits. We will have storm coverage for you.
May impact Connecticut. We'll talk about that coming up.
All right, Bob, thanks for that. And we want to take you right now into the storm. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan is right in the thick of things as we speak.
He has been following the storm for us in Wilmington, North Carolina, and joins us live now on the phone. Ryan, good morning. Nice to talk to you. First of all, describe exactly where you are and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, Ted and Shannon, we are about a mile inland. We're not in a storm surge zone, so we're in a safe spot. But the eye wall of Hurricane Florence is here, and the winds have picked up quite a bit. We're gusting at least a hurricane force. I don't know if you can hear it behind me. But the winds, obviously, let me step back inside here. It's not going to work out so well. So the winds continue to really, really pick up here. And we're talking about gusts in some locations farther up the coast that are anywhere near 90 or 100 miles per hour. We think that's what's moving toward us. So the concern here as we go through the morning hours is going to be a couple-fold. One, we've got the storm surge on the coast. We've got the strong winds across the interior. And then also the big flooding from the heavy rain that's going to be coming in as we go through the next couple days. You can really hear the winds, the roar of the hurricane as it picks up here in Wilmington.
Yeah, Ryan, we're seeing some live pictures here from Wilmington right now as we speak. The winds really whipping up there, and we can certainly hear it there in your phone call right now. Talk about just the flooding concern over the course of the next few hours. How much rain are we expecting? And then when does this rain really start to pile up and create those conditions that really cause it to create some trouble there?
But I think the worst of the flooding from the inland rain is probably not until later today and really over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, because the rain's going to continue here. So the immediate threat is the storm surge and the strong winds, and then from there, the threat is going to grow into inland flooding. And a lot of the rivers and creeks here, the Weather Service is forecasting at this point record amounts of rain. So it's not going to be pretty here in eastern North Carolina over the next 48 to 72 hours.
All right. Well, we're happy you're in a safe place this morning. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan live in Wilmington, North Carolina. We're going to check back in with him throughout the morning, so keep it right here.
Yeah, you can hear those winds just whipping through his phone there earlier this morning. Stay with us. We have much more from Ryan's reports as Hurricane Florence hits. We'll have storm coverage throughout the day as well.
And right now we want to get...
As I mentioned, the worst of the weather is with Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan live in Wilmington, North Carolina. Ryan, describe what you're sensing and feeling right now.
Bob, got to tell you, it's amazing. We are in the eyewall of Hurricane Florence. It's pretty frightening as well. There's a lot of people on the first floor of the hotel where we're staying that are getting a lot of water in their room. It's coming right in through the air conditioners, and they're coming out trying to get some towels to mop up the mess. But let's look around. We'll show you what's going on. I want to show you over here. We've got a few car dealerships, and just look at that wind. It's blowing from north to south right now. As you mentioned, the airport's gusting to 84 miles per hour, and that's probably exactly what we have here. So the eye wall, which you've been mentioning, the eye is where the lightest of the winds are. You've got that really calm center of the hurricane. The eye wall where we are right now is where the worst of the hurricane is, where the winds really ramp up. And we're talking about winds that we expect by the time the real core, that inner core moves in, to probably be on the order of 90 to 100 miles an hour. You can see as we look over here, these trees are actually doing fairly well, and I just want to let you know that we are in a safe spot on the side of the hotel that's sort of being blocked a little bit by the wind. There's no trees where we are standing. Power lines are away, so we're good here. And as we go through the day, the concern is eventually going to shift from the strong winds right now to big-time flooding on the rivers, flooding down by the water. And Bob, I got to tell you, this is pretty remarkable stuff. If this is only a Cat 1, I want nothing to do with a Cat 3 or Cat 4. This is pretty wild, Bob.
Yeah, the pictures are unbelievable, Ryan, the way you're being buffeted by the rain right there. I was going to ask you, if you put this into perspective from your personal experiences, where do you rate what's going on right at this very minute to what you've experienced in other storms in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say the only time I've been in winds stronger than this, and it was pretty close, was probably on the top of Mount Washington when I went up about 5 years ago in January or February. Obviously, it's not quite that cold here, but I've never seen winds like this before. During Irene and Sandy here in Connecticut, along the shoreline, winds got close to 75 miles per hour. We're about 10 above that right now. And every 10 miles per hour of wind speed you add about 10 times the force of the wind. And so you can see, I mean, it's hard to stand at times when you get one of those good gusts to move on through. And we're not done with this yet. We're going to be in weather like this probably until 9 or 10 o'clock this morning. And then we're hoping we can dry out and maybe see a little bit of sunshine as the eye of the hurricane moves in, Bob.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You got to be looking forward to that at least brief respite that the eye will give you later this morning. But then, of course, the eastern side of the storm is, we've seen winds offshore close to 90 miles per hour.
Yeah, I think once we get that eye, we're going to start to see the storm winding down some. So I think the winds on the other side won't be quite as bad as this. But I think that eastern side, Bob, once that moves in, that's going to be where all the flooding is. I was looking at some of the computer models this morning when I got up, and they sort of have a thunderstorm after thunderstorm just going over the same towns in North Carolina once that eye moves in. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the worst flooding, the inland flooding on the rivers and streams, didn't happen until Saturday as the rain piles up. And we're talking about 2 to 3 feet of rain from Hurricane Florence. And some people here have been saying, you know, it was so bad during Hurricane Floyd in 1999 with the flooding, and they only had 15 to 20 inches. So it's possible that they could double that here coming up with Florence. So lots of people obviously very worried. I think the one thing to note is that the winds, now that we're not at a Cat 3 or Cat 4, are probably not enough to do a lot of structural damage, but the storm surge and the inland freshwater flooding like we've been talking about is really going to be catastrophic here.
You know, Ryan, I can only imagine. I'm very thankful that this thing did weaken from that, 48 hours ago, the Category 4 storm. We would be looking at a significantly different scene. It would probably be impossible for you to be outside if that storm had retained its strength.
Yeah, if it was a Cat 4, I would be hunkered in the middle of the lobby. Once you start to get up to a Category 4, 135, 140 mile an hour winds, even well-built structures like this hotel we're in, that's a lot of concrete and rebar, you can start to see failures. With the winds, I'd say that it gusts to about 100. Homes down here are very well built because they're used to these kinds of storms. Also, remarkably, if you look around, the power is still on. Imagine having a storm in Connecticut with 90-mile-an-hour winds where you still have the power on. So the infrastructure here is able to handle storms better than we are, storms of this strength. But still, I don't think that people are ready for what's coming with the rain. If you look at how heavy this rain is, Bob, this is going to happen probably for the next 36 hours. So imagine one of the heaviest downpours you can imagine just continuing for a day and a half or 2 days. And that's what we're looking at here. So yes, we're looking forward to the wind to die down. But then afterwards, I think it's going to be a really long recovery back here in eastern North Carolina and parts of South Carolina too, as the flooding picks up.
Ryan, thank you very much. We'll check in with you again. Get into a safe area right now. Get a little bit of rest. We'll get back to you later this hour. Our Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan reporting live from Wilmington, North Carolina. Just incredible video when you see those wind gusts just like throwing a human around. It's amazing stuff. Back to you guys.
Yeah, those wind gusts certainly relentless this morning. Ryan still has power behind him, but officials are saying there's about 290,000 people in North Carolina without power. So as this storm continues, we're going to continue to watch the changes.
Yeah, it's still early. Right now, we want to bring in Heather Burrian, tracking overnight developments as damage reports start coming into the newsroom. And Heather, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, I want to let you guys know where Ryan is right now. The National Hurricane Center
is in whipping Wilmington, North Carolina right now.
Ryan, what are you seeing there this morning? Are you sensing some of these wind gusts?
Yo, we sure are. We moved inside the little vestibule here. I want to show you what's going on. So our hotel's in here. The lobby is in the back. And already we're getting a lot of water that's coming in because the wind is just being whipped. The rain is being whipped by these really, really strong winds. Now, we were sort of surprised. I thought because of this noise, we'd have a lot of the hotel room guests coming down the lobby and just hunkering here. But so far, pretty much everyone's in their room except for this guy who came down and is filming what we have outside. And this is Nate. And Nate, of course, is a storm chaser from Oklahoma City who came to Wilmington, North Carolina. What do you think of the storm so far? You've been in 25 tornadoes, you say. How does Florence compare?
Well, Florence, we were expecting it originally to come on shore like as a Cat 3, Cat 4, but then as you saw what happened, it weakened due to the dry air and the shear messing around with it. So this actually isn't quite as bad as what I've seen before. I've chased Irma. Irma was maybe a little bit worse than this.
Yeah, Irma was the one in Florida last year.
Correct. Yeah. I was there for it in Punta Gorda, Florida, and I've never actually been inside a tornado, so
that's a good thing. That's a good thing, Nate. Well, Nate, stay safe. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And let me show you what's going on out here. We can take a look. And this guys is the Eyewall of Hurricane Florence, and you can see the wind is really coming in at a good clip. We're gusting, I would say, over 90 to 100 miles an hour. And if you look over there, look over toward that car dealership, you can see the rain is just totally blowing sideways as the wind comes out of the north and is just ferocious. But I did notice, actually, I was able to grab a couple radar snapshots on my phone. It looks like the eye sort of wobbled back toward us pretty quickly. So I'm hoping we can get out of this eye wall pretty soon. I don't know if Bob's still there, but it does look like it sort of picked up a little forward speed. And we may be able to get the eye through or into Wilmington pretty soon where things will calm down, guys.
That's exactly the case, Rye. I think maybe by in the next 90 minutes or so, you'll start to send. And only Ryan could find another weather geek to track the storm with, the gentleman from Oklahoma City. Ryan, there's a couple good gusts there. I mean, again, you're being buffeted around by these winds that are gusting 75 to 85 miles an hour. Look at that. I mean, what's it like? I mean, is the rain pelting you?
Oh yeah, I mean we are soaked. I will say that the wind may have come down a smidge from where it was before, and I think that, well, maybe not now that I look over there, but we are probably only 2 miles or so from the eye. The eye is not far, and the eye of the storm, that's the calm center, and I wouldn't be surprised if in about an hour or so we actually saw a few breaks of sunshine. It just sort of shows you the awe-inspiring power of Mother Nature in the atmosphere, that you can have something as ferocious as this with winds gusting up to 90 miles per hour, maybe even a bit more. Horrible storm surge flooding down on the barrier islands, and then you get into the eye and the sun comes out and it turns dead calm. The wind goes from nearly 100 miles an hour to nothing, and it looks like that's probably what we're going to see in maybe by the start of the Today Show, depending if we can get another wobble west with the center of the storm.
Amazing stuff, Ryan, and make sure, I know you're going to get back into a safer spot here, but thank our videographer, David Mulligan, as well. Both of you riding out Florence in Wilmington, North Carolina. Thanks for the great report.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. You mentioned earlier that the first floor of the hotel building actually underwater because of the rain, the wind pushing it through the air conditioning. So that just tells you just how powerful the conditions are out there this morning.
Yeah, and keep in mind that Ryan said he's on the protected side of the hotel while doing those live reports. Ryan will have much more throughout the day from North Carolina. Stay with us as we continue to track this storm live. The Today Show will have live team coverage coming up at 7 o'clock. Be sure to stay with NBC Connecticut as we continue to track Hurricane Florence.
Again, we're taking you live into the storm. You can stay with us throughout. And this is just the beginning. The storm is crawling across the coastline.
Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan is live in Wilmington, North Carolina, with a quick check on conditions there. Ryan, I know you said the eye was very close to you. Any sign it's getting quieter there?
Not yet. It's still pretty rough outside. We can hear the roar of the hurricane outside. We came inside. It's breakfast time, and some families are coming down. We've got the Mandel family here from Wilmington, North Carolina. They evacuated. And tell me, why did you evacuate, and how's your night been here at the hotel?
The night here has been great. We've had power all night, so it's been good. But our house is about 2 miles away, but we have some giant 80-foot pine trees behind our house, so it just wasn't safe.
So we've actually had power here until like literally 30 seconds ago. It's been pretty amazing, right?
Oh, it's been great, yeah. And the hotel's been great. It's safe, high up, and they've been feeding us, so it's good.
So tell me a little bit about the storm. How has the storm been compared to what you expected?
It's been slow, so it's been a lot of build-up, a lot of waiting for it, and then last night it started coming through in the last hour. It's been pretty crazy.
Yeah, you certainly can hear it. So all right, good luck with everything. We appreciate you talking to us, and we're going to take you outside real quick and show you what's going on. So we're here in the Eyewall, and it's calm inside. I mean, we can't hear a whole lot in the breakfast room, but check out what's going on outside. And this is the hurricane. This is Hurricane Florence. The eye is close by. We're hoping we can get into that eye soon, maybe another half an hour or so to get the calm of that eye in here. But at least for the time being, let me tell you, it is just roaring. And you can see as we look over here, these trees are just bending an incredible amount with these winds that are gusting up to 90 miles per hour. That's the peak wind at the airport just up the coast. The other concerns, as Bob's been talking about all morning, storm surge flooding and inland flooding, and those are still really big issues, even though the winds have come down some with this Category 1 hurricane. We'll send things back over to you.
Ryan.
The thick of it, is there anything that is particularly surprising that you're seeing being in the middle of all the action down there in the Carolinas?
I mean, I think a lot of people were just thrilled that this thing weakened from a Category 4 to a Category 1. But we talked to a lot of people who said, hey, I mean, this was scary in the height of it. The wind was whistling. You heard a really dull, sort of frightening roar as the wind really picked up. And you only get that once the wind gets to about 100 miles per hour. And so we had that early this morning. So I think a lot of people who were thinking, hey, this is a Category 4 is not going to be so bad, after spending the night in the hotel, and a lot of people were saying, hey, this storm was legit. And really, we're only halfway done with it, because now that the wind is starting to die down, you can probably hear it behind me. It's still blowing pretty good. But now that the strongest of the wind has passed, now it's going to be the flood threat, and that I think is going to be the most memorable aspect of the storm.
Absolutely, and those storm surges, obviously extremely serious and incredibly dangerous, and hopefully everybody continues to heed warnings. Ryan, we'll let you get back to reporting. We're going to keep checking in with you throughout the day as we continue to watch Florence, making that major impact on the Carolinas. With more on the track of Hurricane Florence, where is Florence going? How is the track playing out? Let's go to meteorologist Bob Maxon. Bob.
Yeah, very interesting. And
this is no joke for sure. Ryan is now safely inland, away from the worst of Florence and Laurenburg. Hey, Ryan, good to see you. Talk about your experience this morning. We could see you getting battered around a little bit. And what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, we sure were, Carrie Lee and Kevin. The wind was incredible this morning. We had a wind gust to 105 miles per hour as that Eyewall moved on through. There was a lot of damage in Wilmington, North Carolina. We had damage to trees and power lines. Gas station canopies came down. Siding came off businesses and homes. So the damage was fairly widespread that we saw driving around after the worst of it. You could really see what a mess was left behind. We came inland because we were very concerned about the flash flooding and the storm surge flooding that was going to develop. So we wanted to get safely out of the storm surge and the inland flood zone. So we've come inland. We're about, I'd say, 150 miles from the coast right now in Laurenburg. We're actually closer to Charlotte, not far from the South Carolina border. And you can see, guys, even this far inland, it is still whipping pretty good. We're talking about wind gusts probably in the order of 40 or 50 miles per hour, but nothing like what we were dealing with this morning when we had that wind gust to 105 miles per hour in Wilmington, which, as Al Roker just mentioned, was the strongest wind gust they've had from a hurricane in Wilmington, North Carolina since the 1950s. So it's been a long time since they've had a storm this bad, guys.
Right, obviously you were outside this morning in Wilmington doing your job. Potentially it's life-saving information. Folks in Wilmington this morning, were there other people outside, out and about, or was it more or less a ghost town there?
It was pretty much a ghost town. There were a couple storm chasers who drove up from Oklahoma and were staying in our hotel, so of course they were outside. Otherwise, everyone was pretty much hunkered down. A lot of people came to our hotel because it was really well built and it was high up, so that's why we stayed there, because it was a safe place. So we had a lot of people there who were literally, I mean, in their rooms just sort of waiting for the worst to pass, and the sun came up. After sunrise, the wind started to come down, and then you started to see more people venturing back to their homes to seeing the amount of damage. But I want to emphasize for people is that I think we're only a third of the way done with Florence. Even though the storm's starting to weaken a little bit now, the worst of the flooding is going on now, and it's going to continue until Saturday or Sunday. And we could be talking about some really substantial flooding, record flooding on many rivers in eastern North Carolina, and that is going to be what we remember Florence for, what is about to happen, what still is to come in portions of coastal North Carolina.
Hey, Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan, be safe out there. We know you are. Keep us posted on the conditions as they develop and change. In the meantime, take a look. This is Seabreeze, North Carolina. A news crew captured this scene. It was a huge power flash over a highway. Whoa. And you can see right there the power line exploded. Also overnight, someone was spotted getting gas before that power went out. Now the latest on where Florence is and where it's heading.
Yeah, you know, as uncomfortable, Josh, as Ryan looked out there, you know he's thriving being out there in the middle of this, right?
I was in this morning just kind of, helping him out back here in the studio, and was watching some of the live shots, texting with him, and you could just tell he was in his glory being down there in that. But like we said, he was, providing a lot of information, flew around to the hurricane hunters to get that information to help, to get that track more accurate and really help protect the residents down there. Let's take a look live First Alert Doppler radar right now. You can see some very heavy rain bands moving through areas like Wilmington, out towards Whiteville, and all these green boxes representing where flash flooding is occurring. All the way from areas like the Outer Banks, down towards Wilmington, down towards Myrtle Beach, all dealing with flash flooding. Prolific rainfall totals have occurred so far. These purple areas just to the south of Wilmington, right along the ocean, dealing with over 13 inches of rain already. All of these purple areas out towards the Outer Banks dealing with 13 inches of rain. Areas in red, that dark red color, 8 to 12 inches of rain occurring. And as we go throughout the next, say, 24, 36 hours, even through the weekend, we're expecting even more rain.
Make sure when they're there, they feel safe.
And the tropical storm, not done by a long shot. As Josh mentioned at the top of the show, is moving at 3 miles per hour. And one of our computer models this afternoon that we were just looking at is showing 50 inches of rain in Wilmington, North Carolina over the weekend. That is going to be absolutely devastating. And the biggest story for Florence is going to be the catastrophic flash flooding that occurs over the next several days. We're live in Laurinburg, North Carolina tonight. I'm Ryan Hanrahan, NBC Connecticut News. Mike and Keisha, back to you.
Ryan, you speak of the flooding. We know that there were a lot of rescues today in and around Wilmington. You moved inland to get to drier ground. Did you happen to witness any rescues today?
We did not. I mean, Keisha, we were so worried about when this heavy rain would start and the storm surge, we decided that we had to get inland. I mean, 50 inches of rain that's on the way. I mean, that is enough to flood places in southeastern North Carolina that have never flooded before. So we got out before some of that worst flooding started. We were also inland from the barrier islands, so we didn't see any of the storm surge flooding. But we do know there was some. In fact, the Cape Fear River in Wilmington had its highest crest of all time, and that was a combination of storm surge coming up from the ocean and freshwater flooding coming down. So the worst of the flooding, at least where we were, is still to come, but it is not looking good. It is going to be a really, really long duration and very serious event that's going to unfold over the coming days.
Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan bringing this exclusive live report from Laurinburg, North Carolina. Safe travels home, Ryan.
You know, as we mentioned, 4 people have died from Florence, including a mother and baby who were killed when a tree fell on their house. NBC's Lester Holt was there for the heartbreaking end to an hours-long rescue operation.
Tonight, we're going to take you inside a dramatic rescue effort here in Wilmington. A tree crashed on a house, trapping 3 people. For several hours, Wilmington firefighters worked feverishly to move the tree, to move the debris, to get to victims. They brought out a victim on a stretcher. The person was conscious and talking to firefighters.
Involving a mother and an infant. More than 150 people rescued today. Over 700,000 are without power.
Chief Meteorologist Ryan Hanrahan, he has been in the thick of it. Take a look at this video of him last night in the Eyewall. Look at those winds. He could barely stand up straight at times. He's now moved out of Wilmington due to all the flooding, and he is in the town of Laurinburg. He joins us there live. And Ryan, does it feel like the storm is starting to let up at all?
Not really, Keisha. So we were in that Eyewall this morning around sunrise when we had a wind gust to 105 miles an hour, but what's left of that Eyewall has chased us inland now, and we're getting gusts, I'd say easily 60, 65 miles per hour. The power's going out around here. We keep the tree limbs coming down. It is nasty, but what we were dealing with earlier this morning in Wilmington, right along the coast, it was absolutely incredible. Ferocious and terrifying. 2 of the words used by Wilmington residents who hunkered down through Florence with us at the Staybridge Suites Hotel.
We could start hearing it, just after midnight. The wind, and it's dark. It's always scary. You don't know what's going on.
Tell me, what was it like during the worst of the storm last night?
It was pretty crazy. Just seeing the trees come out of the ground, flipped over, and wind going so fast. It was kind of scary a little bit.
The hotel was nearly full. Many people staying were evacuees who wanted a sturdy building.
Our house is about 2 miles away, but we have some giant 80-foot pine trees behind our house, so it just wasn't safe.
In the Eyewall, water poured in the first floor.
About 4 o'clock this morning, we were on the ground floor, and my dog actually woke me up. And there was water coming in where the air conditioning unit was. So the general manager was here. He said he slept here, and luckily there was a room, 3 rooms left, and they moved.
The wind snapped and uprooted trees across coastal North Carolina. Florence peeled back siding from homes and businesses. Now many Wilmington residents are returning home to see the mess Florence left behind. And we're not done with Florence yet. Still a tropical storm. It's moving inland. It will begin to weaken. At least the wind will in the storm surge. The inland flooding looks like it's going to be the biggest story out of all of this, and that's just getting underway. Some of our computer models are showing more than 3 feet of rain down toward Wilmington and along the coast, and that is sure to cause an extreme amount of devastation in areas already hard hit. We're live in Laurinburg, North Carolina tonight. I'm Ryan Hanrahan, NBC Connecticut News. Mike and Keisha, back to you.
Ryan, I have to ask, do you know what the siren is behind you right now? It seems like there's an emergency where you stand.
I think something at the T-Mobile store might have set off an alarm because the wind is just vicious. I don't know, Dave, we can sort of pan around here. You can see we still have power ahead of the Dollar Tree, but we've seen some power flashes. We've heard a few transformers blowing. So we thought we had made it far enough inland that we were going to get out of this stuff. enough, but the storm moved far enough in that we got caught in the Eyewall again. So this is all going to start to wind down, which is good, at least the wind in the next couple hours. But it's that flooding that's going to cause the rivers to just go nuts. That is the big concern going through the weekend.
Ryan Hanrahan, our chief meteorologist, live in the Carolinas tonight. Great reporting, Ryan. We'll see you back here at home.
We're looking for potential rains, which will be coupled with the high tides. We'll have to watch the phases of the moon.
Florence made landfall hundreds of miles away, but emergency crews in our state are still keeping an eye on the storm's path.
Now, many Wilmington residents are returning home to see the mess Florence left behind. As bad as the wind and storm surge was this morning and overnight, it looks like the worst of Florence may be still to come. Some areas could pick up an additional 2 to 3 feet of rain in eastern North Carolina. The National Weather Service says they're expecting catastrophic flash flooding with near record levels on many local rivers and streams. Many of those won't crest until Sunday. We're in eastern North Carolina outside of Wilmington. I'm Ryan Hanrahan, NBC Connecticut News.
And fellow meteorologist Chris Gloniger is in Wilmington tonight. Chris, describe the conditions for us.
Conditions are pretty wicked right now. I was here for the Eyewall when it made landfall around 7:30 this morning, and we are in a band of rain that is only 6 miles wide. Since this storm is hardly moving, we've been under this band now for over an hour and a half with wicked winds, torrential rain. We've easily picked up 3 inches of rain, maybe 4 inches in the last half hour, and we're nearing coastal flooding now, the time of high tide, when that surge is coming back into the intercoastal waterway, where we could see some more moderate flooding. I haven't been in a hurricane quite like this, where we've seen 24 hours of tropical storm winds or stronger.
This is long from over. Can you compare the two when it comes to inland flooding, considering the predictions?
You know, the inland flooding, I was actually, doing reports for you during Hurricane Harvey, and the flooding that we had in Harvey was expansive, it was catastrophic, but it was one of the biggest cities in our country. This, thankfully, isn't as populated as places in southeast Texas that were hit last year. So I think that is the one saving grace, that it's relatively localized. The populations are a lot smaller. So when it comes to a rescue mission and in some cases a recovery mission, it's a lot easier to handle when you have a lot of aid coming in from out of town. But again, regardless, for the people that are dealing with this is their reality. It is pretty heartbreaking regardless.
Chris Gloniger, we hope you stay safe. Thank you for joining us live tonight from Wilmington, and stay with NBC Connecticut and NBC News for the latest on the storm. Coming up, you're going to hear how people here at home in Connecticut are pitching in, trying to help those affected by Florence.
We're sorry. That's the response tonight from Columbia Gas after more than 60 homes burst into flames yesterday.
This somewhere. like right here. Yeah. I just wanted away from where that water's pouring in. Hey, Scott, can you hear me? Okay, let me know when we're good. Okay. All right, 3, 2. Everybody, we're here this morning in Wilmington, North Carolina. This is the eye wall of the hurricane, and you can see the wind is absolutely incredible. We're seeing wind gusts now over 90 miles per hour. The airport gusted to 91. And you can see these pine trees over here. I'm not sure how much longer we have with these. Whoa, look at that wind pouring on through. So far, we haven't seen much damage here, which is good. This is an area that's prone to hurricanes, so the infrastructure and the trees generally can handle a lot of wind here, and that's what we're seeing. We actually just lost power at the hotel moments ago. We actually had power all night long, but the winds were just too much in the last, let's say, half an hour or so, and we did lose power. You can see as we look around, we've got the wind just bringing this rain, just blowing it around like crazy. And the rain is going to be the big story here. Wind is the issue now with these winds gusting so strongly, but as we go through the next, let's say, few hours, the situation is going to deteriorate in terms of rainfall and flooding. And so inland flooding through the day today and into tomorrow, and maybe even into Sunday as well, will be the big story here in North Carolina. So the eye is nearby. We're not far from getting into the calm of the eye. It's not here yet. We're waiting for it. We're still in the eye wall. And the eye wall is the worst part of the hurricane. So you get really nasty, powerful winds in the eye wall. And then the eye comes in and the winds drop to calm. And we may even get a little bit of sunshine as the eye moves in. But the eye wall itself is just hellacious with these winds that are blowing from north to south. The trees are taking a beating. We've got some limbs down. I don't know if you can see that in the distance over here. But you can see a lot of tree limbs down in the parking lot here. But generally, a Category 1 hurricane in terms of wind speed, they can handle it in Wilmington, North Carolina. This is an area that gets a lot of hurricanes. They had one last year. Hurricane warnings are pretty common around here. So in terms of wind speed and infrastructure, we should be okay. The problem is going to be, as we've been talking about all along with this storm, is going to be what happens on the barrier islands with the storm surge. We have heard that some of the flooding on some of the barrier islands and the beaches has been enormous because of the large size of this hurricane. A ton of water was piled in. Think what happened during Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey and Long Island, and even parts of Connecticut. The wind was so strong and the storm was so large. It was the size of the storm that brought all that water inland. So we know that there's been some really serious storm surge flooding in some towns. The town of New Bern, North Carolina, we hear, is under, in some locations, 10, 12 feet of water. And farther down toward the coast, we do know that some of the barrier beaches here have been flooding as well. We're near Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach, and we do know that there's been some flooding down there. We're in a safe spot here, though, in terms of flooding. We're raised up. We're not in a storm surge zone. We're not in an inland flood zone either. We're not expecting any flooding here, and water is probably the #1 concern with flooding. I'm gonna move this back here. This is how we're getting live, so if we lose this, if this blows away, we're done. But that was the strongest wind gust we've had so far. This is the eye wall. This is an honest to goodness hurricane, Category 1, not a Category 4 like it was, and thank goodness for that. I've never been in a storm this strong before. I have no desire to go through anything stronger than this. Woo! So you can see, I mean, what's amazing to me right now is to think we just lost power here. How long ago? 5 minutes ago? A storm like this, if we had this back in Connecticut, it would be certainly worse than Gloria was, and we would be in really rough shape. But I mean, I haven't even seen one tree snap or get uprooted. A lot of limbs coming down. So it just shows you how different parts of the Oh, there goes the hat. Different parts of the country can handle things a little bit better than others, and the power infrastructure too. So, what's the deal from here? Where do things go? So eventually, soon, hopefully, we're going to get into the eye of the hurricane. When we get into the eye, everything's going to calm down. We're going to see the wind calm down. We'll see the rain calm down. We'll probably get, sorry, got a lot of water in my face. We'll probably see a little bit of sunshine as well. So we're hoping to get into that sooner rather than later. And then beyond that, it's the flooding. And we're talking about wind speeds of flooding, excuse me, rainfall of 2 feet, maybe 3 feet from this storm as it moves on through. And 2 to 3 feet of rain is going to be devastating here in North Carolina, in the eastern and southeastern part of the state. All right, guys, so I think we're going to sign off Facebook. But Dave, if you can hear me, are we rolling? I want to do a couple stand-ups here. Okay, so anyway, Facebook, thank you very much. We'll see you on. We'll have another report coming up at 11 a.m. Good? Okay, 3, 2. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning here in Wilmington, and this is the worst of the storm. We just lost power. We're in the eyewall of Hurricane Florence. You can see the trees have really taken a beating. They're blowing around quite a bit. We've had a wind gust over 90 miles per hour, and we're close to the eye. Looks like we're going to get into the eye shortly, and that's when the conditions are going to improve quite a bit. All right, I'm going to do that again. Well, I guess that's it. I don't really think I need anything else. I think winds are coming down a little bit. From like 5 seconds ago. Crap. see it from where we were? Oh, your laptop's still on, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Nope.
No.
Yep, you're good.
Front end back.
It's draining well.
It's draining well.
Yeah.